why I dislike Windows 10 and why I'm upgrading anyway. Now, nearly a year ago at this point, I made a video called Switching to Linux. And while that was going pretty well for a while, I've had to stop for a rather major reason, and I likely won't be able to fully switch to Linux until this issue has been resolved. For capturing gameplay or for doing live streams, I use a program called OBS, which is on Linux. However, there is no game capture ability on Linux for OBS, at least not by default. There is a plugin for it, though honestly I still don't know why it isn't included in the program by default, but it expects Wayland, which Linux Mint doesn't use currently. You can use it with OpenGL as well, but for some reason this locks my frame rate to something like 37 FPS instead of 60. So, okay, it's pretty clear that Wayland is needed, right? But I can't use it on Linux Mint or any of its desktop environments. That's fine, just use it on a distro that does support Wayland. But okay, first of all, I don't want to go distro hopping, but more importantly, I have an Nvidia graphics card, which from what I've read doesn't play nice with Wayland even in the best of cases. So not only would I have to be switching distros, but I'd also have to be getting a new GPU, which nope, that isn't happening, especially not with GPU prices the way they are now. So yeah, that effectively halted my switch to Linux right then and there. OBS is one of the main things I use, so this isn't just a question of if I can do without. Now you might be wondering what a Wayland is anyway, and why it's important. Well, the short version is that it's a way of rendering graphics on Linux. It's a long story and I'd suggest you do more research into it on your own, but the short version is that without it implemented into whichever distro I'm using, as well as Nvidia allowing it, I'm basically stuck.
What the? It's stuck!
Now the good news is that all of this will likely be resolved eventually, perhaps even fairly soon, but the problem for me is that soon isn't now. The increasing problem with Windows 7 over the past couple of years has been the increasing lack of support. This has gone from a small and near non-existent problem a couple years ago to a rather large one within even just the past year. Some programs are losing support to varying degrees, however. OBS lost support a few months ago. I say lost the way I do because realistically it works perfectly fine with patched Qt files. The same thing goes for many programs with this issue. However, I believe it is only a matter of time before something more important doesn't support Windows 7 and it causes the program to break. All Chromium-based browsers are losing support for security updates on Windows 7 in early 2023, so basically everything that isn't Firefox or a fork of it. Nvidia will be dropping security updates in 2024, and mainline updates have been over for a while now. Most modern hardware hasn't supported Windows 7 out of the box for a while, even if just for things like USB drivers, thus requiring some workaround solution to solve the problem. And the big one. Windows 7's update support from Microsoft ends in January 2023. But wait, why do I care? Well, as I mentioned in the phone upgrade problem video, security issues are a big concern nowadays. We don't live back in the Melissa or Sasser days, where the way you could avoid viruses was by not clicking on notavirus.exe. Sure, plenty of viruses still operate like that, but at the same time there are plenty of zero-click exploits out there. And I'm going to use this example again, but do you think that when Log4j was happening, that some random person playing Minecraft was going out of their way to see if they could get a virus or ransomware installed on their computer that day? Now, I'm not the type of person who's checking for updates every 30 seconds, and I don't think I really need feature updates. But I'm also not the type of person who hasn't updated their OS since Windows 7 Service Pack 1 because updates just cause more bloat. Sure, some of them genuinely do, especially some of Windows 10's, which we'll get into, but at the same time there are plenty of legitimate and arguably important security updates. So given the problems I mentioned, let's establish this. I have to upgrade to Windows 10 at this point. But what version of Windows 10 am I going to pick? Well, it won't be the regular versions. Now, the home version for your boomer grandma having ads pre-installed makes some sense. That still doesn't negate how stupid it is, but it at least makes more sense. Also, apparently even if you uninstall this adware, it'll sort of just reinstall itself every so often. In a supposed pro version though, that adware is still there, for some reason. Oh, and that's not to mention all the spyware that's pre-installed on the OS. Oh wait, sorry, that's called telemetry now. Yeah, 10 years ago we would have just called this spyware, just saying. Oh, and by the way, mainline Windows 10 support ends in 2025, which means I've gotten myself 2 more years of updates for my troubles. So it certainly won't be one of those versions. But don't worry, there's still hope yet. You see, there's a secret version of Windows 10 that you can use. It's called Windows 10 Enterprise IoT LTSC. Yeah, rolls right off the tongue, huh? It will receive updates until 2032, and not the intrusive feature updates which have a high possibility of breaking the system twice a year. It also doesn't feature much of the extra garbage that comes pre-installed with normal Windows 10. But, wait, it says Enterprise. So that means it's only for giant businesses and stuff, right? Well, the good news is that you can easily buy a key for this version of Windows 10, and much to Microsoft's disappointment, it is entirely legal to do so. Only seems fitting considering the only regular alternatives are filled with ads and spyware, which, believe it or not, most people don't want. Also, did you know that every single version comes with a generic key you can use and can readily find online? Huh, I don't know why I brought that up. Guess I thought that was just interesting. That's going to be the version of Windows 10 I'm using. Sure, it isn't perfect by any means, but it's an upgrade from the other versions, and in my opinion closer to a sidegrade to Windows 7, as opposed to a downgrade like the regular Windows 10 versions are. And hey, if you're running a regular version of Windows 10 right now, I'm pretty sure you can upgrade to the better version. You know, so you can avoid Windows 11 when Windows 10 support inevitably ends. Because Windows 11 somehow looks even worse than 10. Is Windows 10 a perfectly fine operating system? I mean, sort of. Don't get me wrong, once you remove all the unneeded garbage and you're only operating with security updates, which are much less likely to break your system compared to the feature updates, the operating system is perfectly fine. But that's the problem. The main additions of Windows 10 come with a bunch of unneeded garbage. Yeah, thanks Microsoft. I really wanted Candy Crush forcibly installed on my system by default. I really wanted spyware pre-installed as well. And that's the biggest issue. You have to deliberately go out of your way to get a halfway decent version of Windows anymore, and if you don't, you're saddled with a bunch of extra stuff, which at best you don't need, or at worst is actively detrimental. And that's why I haven't upgraded until now. Not only was there no need, but sticking with what I've known had seemed like a better option. But it isn't like I haven't known about the Enterprise version of Windows 10 before. I've known about it for a long time now. But Windows 10 as an operating system has always just seemed like an insulting slap in the face given just how far Microsoft went out of their way to make sure you got a lackluster or arguably even bad experience. I mean, for crying out loud, I haven't even mentioned stuff like, you gotta sign into your Microsoft account. So let's make this clear. I'm not upgrading to Windows 10 because I want to. I'm upgrading because I've been left no other choice if I want to run or continue to run certain programs, and to keep my system secure. But again, we have just under a decade before having to deal with this problem again, so maybe, just maybe, Linux will be to a point by then where I can finally ditch Windows. I suppose we'll see though. And as a final note to Windows 7, which I have been using since I believe 2012 or 2013, Windows 7 was a very good operating system, and it will be missed, just as Windows XP is missed. Well, that's all for now. Thank you all for watching, and take care.
You were good, son, real good. Maybe even the best.